What it do, cyber world. It is your girl, the one, the only, Ash Brown, and this is the Ash Said It Show. I appreciate all of the love, all of the support. Over 1,800 episodes and growing. Yes, 500,000 plus streams all around the world. Thank you guys for all of the support. It makes a huge, huge difference. Today, I've got with me author of Fast Starting a Career of Consequence, the wonderful Frederick Sievert. Hey, Fred.
Hi, Ash. Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Fred. So, Fred, where in the world are you today?
We could spend the whole show talking about that because my wife and I made a multi-generational move.
Oh.
We moved from Massachusetts to New Hampshire. We're living at a former ski lodge, and we were living with two of our daughters, a son-in-law, and three grandkids. So it's been a real inspiration and a wonderful kind of a back-to-the-future type move.
Yeah, that sounds like a whole family trip. It sounds like fun. It sounds like a good time.
It has been, yeah.
Awesome. All right, Fred. So let's get into the book some. Where did the inspiration come from for this book project?
Yeah, I had written two prior books, both of them faith-based, and my daughter, who had recently graduated from college and was a tough job market, she was languishing in an entry-level position at a really large global cosmetic company. And she came to me one day and she said, "Dad, you've got to give me some tips on how I can get noticed here, how I can build a career and be identified as a high-potential employee." So I was president of New York Life at the time, and I thought to myself, how would I notice somebody deep down in the organization? I thought long and hard about that. I came up with 5 tips and gave them to Dina. Her name's Dina, and she implemented every one of them, even though some of them she felt were difficult. I think I kind of terrified her with some of the things I suggested she do. But she did extremely well. She ended up getting multiple promotions in 2 or 3 years. And I ended up using those tips in a couple commencement addresses I gave and got a lot of positive feedback. So I wrote a short article about it. And my agent saw the article and he gave me a call and he said, "Fred, you've got another book here." And I said, "Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it, but yeah, maybe I could do that." And he said, to expand on the tips and it'll be great because I don't see anything like it in the marketplace. And I said, "But you know something? I'm going to have to talk about my faith." And he said, "Of course, it's in your DNA." So the book has 5 chapters on biblical principles in the workplace and 10 chapters. I expanded beyond the 5. I gave Dina 10 chapters on fast starting tips for, building a career.
So would you say that the book is for maybe just new college graduates, people that are, fresh on the scene as far as work goes?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that. Because originally publishers will say to you, narrow your market, have a very specific market. So initially I thought, I'm going to help Christian college students who are graduating, going into the workplace. So that was the initial market. But then I thought to myself, well, wait a minute. The subtitle had the words entering the workforce. I said, I'm going to change it to entering or re-entering the workforce because many adults were coming back from child rearing years and others coming back from military service. But then the big event happened, and that was COVID-19. And I was finishing up the book, and I realized, millions of people are coming back from COVID-19, and others are either coming back to the same job or reimagining their future. And I thought, this is a huge market, and my passion has always been to positively impact the lives of young people and others by coaching them and mentoring them. And suddenly, it really was quite wonderful and providential, in my view, that this market expanded so dramatically at a perfect time when people were coming back to work. So it's a great, even this call is a perfect timing. I know it'll probably air a little later, but it's graduation season, and fast starting a career of consequence is a great great graduation gift.
Oh, absolutely. Now, you touched on something I wanted to get into. COVID changed everything. Me, myself, I was furloughed from an airline. Everyone was going through all these different things and trying to rebuild, after this post-COVID life that we're living. So for people, Fred, that their faith was really tested during that time and really afterwards,
Yes.
how would you suggest them using faith or using their faith to push forward and like you said, re-enter the workforce?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about this book that I've written is there are 5 chapters, as I said, on biblical principles in the workplace and 10 on the fast starting tips, but it's all integrated, Ash. It's the biblical chapters have many specific examples of how I implemented biblical principles in the workplace and, ultimately became president of a Fortune 100 company. And the practical business tips also have numerous scriptural references. So I'd say keep the faith, identify your spiritual gifts, which is kind of the first chapter in the book. And there's actually in the appendix a spiritual gift assessment tool where you can, zero in on what are your real spiritual gifts, given after you've answered some questions in this assessment tool, and go after something. Determine what you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. They say if you're passionate about your work, you never work a day in your life, and I think it's really true. Don't worry so much about compensation. Worry more about finding something you're really going to love. And go after that. And then the 10 chapters on practical tips, I really made it very practical because I wanted to give people specific ways, multiple specific ways in each chapter on how they could advance and get noticed and become recognized as someone of high potential and ultimately, advance in their career. And even if they're not interested in, becoming a CEO or a president, you're going to have a happier life if you have a passion for what you're doing and you're succeeding at work.
I love that. Ultimately, what do you want for these new college grads that are coming out? They've spent, the 4 years and sometimes even more, depending on what their concentration was. What do you want them to get from this book?
Well, there's some very simple tips and advice that they can easily implement right away, like one chapter's on demonstrating commitment to the company by getting there early and leaving late. Because I noticed at New York Life, it was like the employees were working on a time clock. I mean, if somebody stayed a little late, it just demonstrated commitment. I mean, there's other ways to demonstrate commitment. Yeah. One of the more important ones for my daughter was one. I said to her, I want you to understand and embrace the company's vision and mission. And I'd like you to memorize the company's mission statement. And this is advice for your college students you're mentioning, even when they are interviewing. If you're interviewing, memorize the mission statement. Now, my daughter said to me, Dad, you really want me walking around quoting the mission? And I said, no. I said, I want you to memorize it so you can recite it, because then it's going to be embedded in your brain. And you'll be able to assess decisions made by your colleagues, by your peers, by your superiors against the mission, because in my view, it's truly very critical for a company to make decisions that are well aligned with its mission. So those were a couple. Then another was, I said to her, I'd like you to develop a cultural and organizational awareness. Understand how things work, how things get done. Spend a lot of time interacting with other people in other departments. And this applies whether it's a small company, a mid-sized company, or a huge company. And you'll get to know things that are going on in the company and how things really get accomplished. And also, I said, she was a French major, and I said, and her company was an international global cosmetic firm. I said, use your French. Volunteer to do some translating for the people who are dealing with the business in France. And she did that. So she became known quite quickly as someone interested in all aspects of the business. And there's just a lot of things like that. I'll just give you two more examples. Is when I was writing it, I thought, what are the two things that make people most nervous when they're new to a company? And one is attending meetings, and the other is making presentations. So I have pretty significant chapters on the title of the meeting chapter is Over Prepare for Every Meeting, and I give a number of steps on how someone could do that. And the presentation chapter is the title is Make Every Presentation a Command Performance. And I got to tell you a funny thing, Ash, just when I wrote that chapter, because here I am in New York Life, I'm doing presentations every day. Mm-hmm. And they're not like the same presentation, 20 times. It's always different. So I made a detailed section in that chapter about how I prepared and how I got it down to a point where I didn't have to read it. I could speak it from bullet points. Right. And I thought, wow, I thought to myself, this is kind of long. I really considered pulling it out of the book. But I left it in. I left it in, and I went to a wedding after the book was published, and this guy comes up to me and says, "Are you Fred Sievert?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Listen, I read your book, and I tell you, I just love that chapter on making presentations because I'm often called on to do that. And I'm so nervous, it's like going to the dentist. I can't wait till I get out of there." And I said, no, there's a way to get yourself prepared for it. So, there's just a whole lot of practical advice here if you're new to a company, and even for people who aren't new to a company. I mean, they can begin to apply these principles even if they've been around a while. And even some entrepreneurs have told me that they really enjoyed the book and it gave them a lot of good advice, even as an entrepreneur and not someone deep down in a big organization. So it really has broad appeal and getting a lot of positive feedback. And then, like I said, the timing couldn't be better. Right. With so many people reimagining their careers.
Wow, that is incredible, Fred. Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And much more success for you and the book. Of course, let everyone know the best way to get the book.
Yeah, well, certainly Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com, but also my website. You can get them at a bit of a discount and without any shipping costs. It's storiesofgodsgrace.com. No dots, dashes, or apostrophe, just all one string of letters. Storiesofgodsgrace.com. And, those are probably the best ways to get the book.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you again, Fred. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Ash. Great to be able to speak to you and fulfill my passion once again.
I appreciate that. I certainly do. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you so much for all the love, all the shares, the cares. It makes a huge difference. Keep in mind, anyone to tell you that you can't do what you want to do, you look them square in the face, you tell them, don't believe me, just watch. Watch what I do. Watch me make it happen. Watch me make history. That's what we're doing this for, the history books. Social media is nice, but real life is so much better. Until next time, you guys.